Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to IFFGD's Research Award Winner series titled Where Are They Now? This program was designed not only to acknowledge this year as being IFFGD's 30th anniversary, but to also kind of reconnect with some of our past IFFGD Research Award winners. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Rao, who is our 2009 IFFGD Research Award winner for Senior Investigator in Clinical Science. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Rao.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this very distinguished panel. It is a pleasure and an honor. And I think, I really view IFFGD as a very important partner in our ability to connect with our patients, in our ability to change how we deliver the best quality healthcare, especially in an area which is often very neglected, significantly not talked about, and I think to which I think the efforts that Nancy Norton really put together over so many years, championing these important neglected areas in gastroenterology, bringing this up to the forefront, encouraging people like myself and others who've been in this field to keep pursuing this, that there is going to be light at the end of the tunnel, that we will collectively find better ways of understanding these patients, finding mechanisms, and also designing studies and developing new treatments. So to that core mission, I think it was always a pleasure to be part of IFFGD for many years. I think even my association with Nancy started in the early 90s, but it really blossomed much more during our semi-annual postgraduate meetings, as well as when I became president of American Neurogastroenterology Motility Society. I think we had a very close relationship, also through the clinical research committee that I was a part of before that. So all in all, I think, we have been close partners in helping move the field forward, in helping younger generation of investigators, and also helping the society that is advancing the science. Whereas Nancy's involvement has primarily been in patient education, in connecting the patients with the physicians, and in promoting the field. So to that, I'm always grateful for her work and IFFGD's work now under Cecile's leadership. So very proud to be part of your group, and thank IFFGD for recognizing me as a distinguished scientist and investigator. I guess it's almost 11 years, I think, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe even more, maybe 11 years, for a very beautiful ceremony in Milwaukee that I and my family attended, and also my dear sister, who is no longer with us, but she enjoyed being there with me and also participating in the celebrations.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I mean, I'm sure some of our listeners aren't familiar with how far we have come in over the 30 years. So this will be a pleasure of speaking with you today and just kind of hear your perspective of how much this field has grown in the past 11 years. And even before then, just having this conversation with you is an honor. And we just thank you for joining us today, and especially for mentioning Nancy, who really is the champion of raising awareness for people with gastrointestinal disorders. So
Thank you.
Yeah, so I know you touched on a little bit about some of the research that you have been involved in, but what are some of the current research studies that you are involved in today?
So I think I want to take a little step back and then talk a little bit about my approach to research, and then we'll come to the studies and research. So, I mean, there are probably different ways by which people do research. For me, the problems that I'm trying to solve through research come from my patients. And it is the patients who come to me with challenging questions. Yes, I give myself a little credit for being a extraordinary listener that a lot of people have told me I am, and I agree with that. So I listen very intently when my patients describe their suffering, their problems that they're encountering. To me, that is the spark for my research. So I then try and see, well, why is this individual experiencing this symptom or this constellation of symptoms? What is it, and why is it that, you know, many of my peers and colleagues have not been able to help or address this? That is often the starting point for my research. I'm not a kind of a Isaac Newton who would sit under an apple tree and then watches this apple fall and says, why is this apple not going the other way around? You know, why is it coming down only one way? And then, of course, he is such a brilliant scientist who goes on to find invent gravity and everything else. But for me, the apple falling is my patients. They are the people who drive my research. So that has been the prime motivator for me. And I would urge many others who are particularly clinical investigators and clinical researchers who deal with humans on a day-to-day basis. That is an important trait to try and understand, emulate, and probably even pursue, because that will give them ideas. It will also improve their ability to help their patients and connect with their patients. So I fundamentally think that I think is a very important thing to bring in. So then that leads to the question that you were asking, really, what are we currently doing? And, you know, how have we really gotten into this whole area? So before I get to that, let me just, you know, broadly tell areas that we've been working in. So my big area for interest has been in patients with constipation, patients with stool leakage or fecal incontinence, patients who suffer with gas and bloating, and also patients with gastroparesis. Those are like the broad 4 areas where my group has been really involved in trying to help improve diagnostic tools, improve treatments, and improve our understanding of the mechanisms. So again, all of this again stems from my patients, as I said. So my patients come and say, you know, doctor, I can't poop. I'm having difficulty having bowel movement. So I said, well, why is that? I mean, you can give them this laxative, you can give them the latest drug, but it's not responding. So then you go back to the drawing board and you ask the question, why? When you look carefully, we found, and I was one of the first people in the world in the early 90s now to describe a condition called Dysynergic Defecation, where the act of pooping has become incoordinated. Now, we were unaware that people can even do this at that time. We not only were unaware of that, we identified the mechanics of that. And then we said, how do we treat this? And then we came up with a new treatment called biofeedback treatment. So earlier part of my research was focused on really characterizing this condition, dysynergic defecation, and then really trying to ask the National Institutes of Health to support us, which they kindly did, and which was one of my first NIH grants, which was really looking at this condition of dysynergic defecation and then testing in a randomized control manner whether biofeedback treatment really helps. So having shown that biofeedback works, the next step, people started questioning, well, how do we believe this guy? You know, maybe this is some magic wand. Dr. Rao is kind of swinging on these patients, maybe mesmerizing them rather than science. So we really wanted to see, well, what is it that biofeedback really does in these patients? So that was the next phase of our research, and where we started studying how the gut talks to the brain and how the brain in turn talks with the gut. In other words, in a bi-directional manner, we started studying what we call as gut and brain interactions. And there are different tools that are available, but at that time, I'm not talking about, you know, mid 2004-5 time, most people were focused on really magnetic resonance imaging of the brain, which is a great tool, but it only tells us how the gut talks to the brain, but really not the other way around. And we wanted to develop a technique where we could do both, in the same patient at the same time or the same individual. So we came up with a different methodology that we call cortical evoked potentials, by which we can stimulate the rectum or the anus muscle and then pick up activity in the brain where the rectum and the anus is located. Then that informs us how the anorectal region is talking to the brain. We then selectively put a magnetic coil on the brain where the anocortical region is and stimulated those areas and saw how that message was getting back to the rectum. So through this mechanics, we developed for the first time a bidirectional method of studying gut and brain interactions in a motility laboratory, which was not possible before that. So that was good. So as we continued with our research, we did identify that these patients with dysynergic defecation have significant altered gut-brain-gut interactions. And after biofeedback, that dysfunction was restored back to normal. So that gave us, for the first time, a clear mechanistic understanding of what was happening in patients with dyssynergia and what did biofeedback do to undo this, this behavioral problem that they have now learned. As we were doing this, we also developed another test where we not only we were studying the brain talking to the anorectum, we wanted to study how the spinal cord also talks to the anorectum. That's a test called TAMS, T-A-M-S, stands for Trans-Lumbosacral Anorectal Magnetic Stimulation Test. So we came up with that test to study the peripheral spinal cord anorectal function. Then we found that patients who had bowel problems, particularly stool leakage issues and so on, they had significant neurological dysfunction of the pelvic floor and of the lumbar and sacral plexus nerves that we were not aware of before. We were mostly focusing, yes, unfortunately, people have had a tear of the anal sphincter muscle, which happens in some women from obstetric injury or from surgery to the anal sphincter. They get stool leakage. But the fact that they had significant nerve damage was not clearly known or understood or even studied. There was some patchy evidence, but not clear. So we showed that, hey, there is a major neurological dysfunction in a majority of patients with significant stool leakage. So that learning then led to the next question. If there is a neurological dysfunction of the back and the spinal cord and the spinal nerves that supply the rectum, can we do something to change this neurological dysfunction? And that is the story of my current research now. So what we then said, okay, how do we, now we can do this. I mean, there is one treatment already out there, which is called sacral nerve stimulation, where we insert wire into the sacral nerves and connect those wires to a pacemaker, and then we stimulate the nerves. And this is an invasive procedure. It can be done and has been shown to help patients with stool leakage, also urinary leakage. But we wanted to really develop something that is not so invasive, that doesn't require this. Plus, we found that the neurological problems in patients was patchy. We studied 4 sites, 2 higher up lumbar and 2 lower down sacral sites. And we found that some people only have 1 site. Some people have all 4 sites. So if that is the case, then if we put a wire only on 1 side in the sacral region, how are we improving the nerve dysfunction that is happening everywhere else? So that didn't make sense to us. So we thought maybe we should really develop a treatment where we can treat all 4 sites in a non-invasive manner without any wires or electrodes. So that led to another treatment that is called TNT, or Trans-Lumbosacral Neuromodulation Therapy. And this was the treatment that we came up with this somewhere around 2013, 14 time. I submitted a grant to the NIH, which they kindly funded me for this as a pilot study, because we were the first people in the world to do this, and first time anywhere it's being applied to the back, magnetic energy for this kind of a problem. And then we wanted to really be sure that it works and it's safe. But then we also didn't know at what frequency and what dose. So it's very early stages. So we said, well, we'll fix the dose, but let's look at different frequencies. Our hypothesis was based on the literature in the neurology literature. They found that if the nerves are not conducting very well, then you need to stimulate those nerves at a higher frequency. Then they start conducting better and connecting. Whereas if the nerves are hyperexcited, then you stimulate at a lower frequency to calm them down and reset them. So that is the neurology literature. So we said, well, higher frequency is something like 15 hertz. Lower frequency is like 1 time a second, as opposed to 15 times a second. Let's do all three, 1, 15, and put a middle one, 5. We thought somewhere in those three, one of them should help our patients. Then 2 years later, we finished that research. And of course, our expectation was the 15 will work, 1 will fail, and 5 will come in between. Lo and behold, the exact opposite happened. 1 worked brilliantly. Almost 90% of patients improved. 5 was the worst in our group, about 35%, and 15, about 50%, 50% got better. So all three did work. They were between 30, 50, and 90% patients got better. So telling us that this modality of treatment can be useful, but clearly 1 hertz worked. So we then went back to the NIH with a new grant, asking them to give us support for a sham control study. Because we have to prove now beyond any reasonable doubt that if you give a placebo, that is a sham, versus the real treatment, that the real treatment will come out superior. And that is our current work that we are embarked on for the last couple of years. We have a sister site, which is the Harvard, Massachusetts General Hospital site, and our site, Augusta University. And we're really conducting a randomized controlled trial using sham and also an escalating dose. And so that is one of the areas that we've been working on.
Yeah. And, the one thing that I really like about this is just the whole backstory of really how you guys got to this point. I mean, just the whole backstory and how many trials and errors and trials, more things that you have learned about these gastrointestinal disorders, and just how much things have evolved over time in order to get diagnostic testings and treatment options for patients living with GI disorders. So we really appreciate the backstory, and as well, just all of the hard work and effort that you've put into your research to really help the patients, not only that you're working with, but patients around the world. I mean, your research really does touch beyond the reaches of just your university.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that was a great story, right? I mean, so in terms of really figuring out, so the other areas, just to complete the part that I've been focused on really is also in areas of people complaining of gas and bloating. It's a very common complaint. 15, 20% or more of the population suffers with this problem. Mm-hmm. And again, we've been trying to really understand why, and we've come a long way. And there are 2 or 3 areas where my lab and my team, really outstanding team that I've been privileged to work with, have really helped us. One area is in a condition called food intolerance, where we have identified fructose. Unfortunately, the industry, the food industry is what I mean, has changed the way in which they make food anymore.
Significantly.
So what has happened is almost serendipitously, they have substituted sucrose, which was the main sugar that we all took before, to fructose for various reasons. There was a Cuban crisis. Politically, there was a problem getting sucrose. And then fructose was cheaper to make because of the farming industry in the US, etc. Fructose is 2.5 times sweeter, and it is cheaper. It has a longer shelf life, etc., etc. So fructose became a substitute for sucrose in a number of common products. Let's take Coca-Cola, the drink we drink, or many other products. Then the challenge really is all of us don't have a good normal absorptive capacity for fructose. Some of us have limited capacity. So if you take a drink or eat a food product that has more fructose than your body can handle, you're going to suffer from it. You're going to get gas and bloating. So this was a problem we again identified in the late 90s. We came up with a test, and then we've gone on to really, most recently we've been working on an enzyme supplement. The results are still in the early stages, so I'm not able to share with you right now, but hopefully we may have something like a lactate that we have for lactose intolerance, something like that for fructose in the near future. Along the same token, the other area on the gas and bloating that has been interesting for us is there are people who get infection in the small bowel that everybody now knows as SIBO, SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So we've been actually working in refining the diagnosis using glucose breath test, also doing cultures. We actually go endoscopically and really help take samples from and then grow what kind of bacteria grows. We also found something interesting is we found many people were growing fungus in large amounts. Wow. So we coined the term C4, a small intestinal fungal overgrowth. So that's a new thing. So that is, again, another important area. Now, when we treat the C4, patient symptoms get better. We treat the SIBO, patient symptoms get better. Or sometimes we've got to treat both and they get better. So that is an important area that we've, again, worked on, was in the gas and bloating arena in trying to help focus these patients.
And I think, too, kind of what you're touching on there as far as like what helps with one patient and what helps with another. I think that it's a statement for all patients are different. And so not all treatments are going to work for every individual patient. Sometimes you have to tailor a treatment for each one. And that's where research comes into play. And that's kind of sort of what you're talking about here is how research can really help us understand of what treatment options works best for each patient.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about some of the research that you're involved in, and also just kind of what we hope to gain a better understanding about in order to help patients living with these GI conditions. But what would you consider being your most successful study and why?
Oh, that would be a very tough challenge. I think I will have to pass on that because for me, the way I look upon all of these studies as pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. I think, there's the patient walks into my clinic is a big jigsaw puzzle. My goal is to really fill in all the pieces of that puzzle so that when the patient leaves my office, we've gotten rid of the problem. So with that in mind, I think no one research or one area that I think we've worked on, I think I would say is anything better than the other one, because I think they're all equal, because every one of them, some people, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody, but people have always generally trivialized gut motility disorders when compared to other problems such as, cancer, which is, I know, quite serious and life-threatening, or a GI bleeding problem and endoscopic research and so on and so forth. I don't mean to really, say one is better, but for a given patient, every problem is the same. Yeah. Whether they are healthy or they're unhealthy. Once they have a disease, whatever form the disease is, they're no longer healthy, and that plagues them. Yes, unfortunately, some problems like cancer or even heart disease is a major killer. People with a bowel problem or even a stool leakage, they don't die, but their day-to-day life is almost like half dead. They can't function in life. They are plagued. They can't socialize. They can't interact with family. They become social recluses. So that is why I said, whether it's a gas and bloating issue, constipation issue, stool leakage issue, or even the gastroparesis issue, they are all equal. For me, I would like to see these diseases conquered today, not even tomorrow, so that we can look at other ways in which we can help. But we are making slow but significant headway.
Yeah, we're learning, and it's just what you said, that these gastrointestinal disorders, as well as any chronic illness, it really does impact the day-to-day life for these patients. And like you said, one research hidden over the other. They're all giving us an opportunity to better understand the disorders.
Let me share a simple anecdote, which, I mean, anecdotes which just happened yesterday. I was in my clinic yesterday, and there was this almost 80-year-old gentleman with his wife. So he first came to see me about a year ago, 9-10 months ago, with bowel issues, constipation, difficulties, been struggling for the last 3-4 years, had tried a number of laxatives, not working. So we examined him, studied him. We found that he had dysynergic defecation. And then I saw him sometime saw him back about September time. And then I recommended that, he should go and get biofeedback done with my team. He agreed for that. And then after that, I haven't seen him until yesterday. So he went, and then he had only one session in first week of October. That apparently it was a Thursday. He had the session, and now I'm telling you the story that his wife was telling me yesterday. He said, as she said, Dr. Rao, on the 3rd of October, we came for this session, and we also saw you briefly. I said, yes, I remember that. And then we had the treatment. We went home. And then the next day, Friday, and then it was Saturday. And then Saturday afternoon, I was just sitting down and I was knitting something for my grandchild. And my husband comes to me. He taps on my shoulder and he says, hey, why don't we go out for a walk and then maybe think of getting a takeaway? And then she actually looked up and said, are you really serious? And he said, yeah, I think so. I feel good. Let's go take a walk, and let's go and get something to eat. He hasn't said that for 3 years. And this lady wasn't complete. She was actually in tears yesterday, saying
I'm almost in
one
tears.
session of treatment, she said, he was a different man. He said, the last 3 days, his bowels have been something very different than what he's experienced 3 years. He's been completely shut down from all of his activities. So those kind of little anecdotes and incidences really tell you, what impact your care can have on an individual patient. So that kind of gives you a little flavor of something, what we can actually do for these people. I mean, and if you have a few hundreds like this, you can see, or thousands like this, how many lives we've been able to impact and change. But that was a very poignant story worth relating to you.
Yeah, and how many lives you're impacting and changing just through research. And that's just how important research is. So in some of the other acknowledgements, I know we've talked about a little bit of the grants that you've received in order to fund the research, which funding is very crucial in being able to even start the research. So what other acknowledgements might have you received, or grants that you've received since winning the IFFGD award in 2009?
So I think I've been very fortunate and privileged really for receiving National Institutes of Health funding almost continuously for over 20 years. So I think an IFFGD award clearly helped, give me more national, international recognition. And even for the grant reviewers, when they see, I think we've heard his research before, we know he has been chosen by his peers to receive a distinguished award, which really speaks of volumes of his ability to do credible scientific research. So I think it spurns that kind of effort. But in addition to the NIH funded research, I think the American College of Gastroenterology has given us small grants that have helped, especially some of my junior faculty and fellows, to fund them for research. We had a grant from the ACG to look at home versus office biofeedback therapy. And that was very good. And then we've also been good in getting some industry grant support, looking, for example, with two or three areas. One I would like to mention is something called the Vibrant Capsule, which is in the early phase of clinical trial, where unlike a pill that you take for treating constipation, we know pill definitely helps, but this is not a chemical, but it's a vibrating capsule. So you swallow the capsule, and then it reaches the colon and starts gently vibrating. And locally, it sparks colonic activity and moves the colon. So we've been involved with that study, and right from the early days and so on, we just had a paper published, and we're still doing it. Another exciting area that I think that I've been working for many years is Smart Pill, which has been a very good diagnostic pill since late 2000s. And then where this is a diagnostic pill that after you swallow, it measures the rate of stomach emptying, small bowel, and colon emptying, all with one pill in a standardized manner. So we've been involved, 20, 30 papers we published with that really device, and that was really investigative designed research, and it's now FDA approved and so on. So it's really good. And the most recent one I'll just mention is another smart capsule. It's called SCBDS. It's called Smart Capsule Bacterial Detection System. Unique capsule. Again, you swallow the capsule. See, what I'm telling you with this capsule technology, we are trying to move away from putting tubes. And remember, I said I go down with the endoscope, take juice out, and really culture. So for looking at bacterial infection in the gut, that's all very invasive. Putting a tube to study esophageal stomach muscle function, which I do, is invasive. But we're trying to really see, can we get the same information without subjecting the patients to this invasive method of testing? Also, to try and keep the individuals in their own natural environment, doing their activities of daily living without messing them up and studying their bodily problems. So that is really the goal. So with that in mind, this capsule is very neat because you swallow this capsule, it goes into the small bowel, it knows exactly where it is in the stomach or the small bowel. It has a smart detection system. Once it enters the small bowel, a small window opens from the capsule and a little wick comes out of the window and bathes in the small bowel juice for about 30 minutes. And then the window closes. Then the capsule actually processes the fluid and detects bacteria which was in the fluid. And then on a smartphone app, gives you a printout. How much bacteria there is, what kind of bacteria there is, and so on and so forth. Now, how cool is that technology? Yeah. So, I mean, of course, you know, we are just in the very early stages of this capsule technology. But I mean, that is another area of research that I've been engaged with the company, and I think we've just had a publication or an abstract presentation at the last ECG meeting, and we hope that we'll continue to do more work on this kind of technology. So those are some really cool things and cool ideas that we are really working on, which have all been, you know, in the last 5 to 10 years of research, trying to advance our field, develop new diagnostics and new therapeutics.
Yeah, so exciting. And I mean, always some great things coming out of your lab. But I mean, just to think of how far research has come in all the years that I'm sure you've been involved, just seeing just capsules being able for patients to still live their day-to-day life normally without having to come into the office. I mean, I've been able to actually sit in and watch some of those procedures be done. So it is very challenging for patients. And so it's really cool that doctors recognize that as being the challenge and are trying to further research so that they are able to do it in a non-invasive way. That's very cool. Thank you so much for sharing that research with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I know you talked a little bit about your passion, and really it just seems like your passion is definitely for the patients in general as a whole, and just really trying to answer some of the questions that they have through research if you can. But what do you specifically enjoy about being a researcher?
So I think what I really enjoy now, I mean, you know, I think having been involved with research for, wow, over 35 years, first of all, I'm also very grateful to my mentors. You know, my mentors were from England. Professor Nick Reed and Professor Derek Holsworth, both at the University of Sheffield. That's where I did my PhD. You know, they were very astute clinicians and researchers. So they kind of inculcated this spirit of research and clinical research in me, and particularly the spirit of how you mix your day-to-day clinical care of patients with research. And that, I think, in itself is a unique blend of how you do research. Because generally, the way folk think of research is, oh, okay, today I'm in the clinic, I'm going to take care of patients, and tomorrow I'm going to sit in the lab and do my research. So there is a complete separation in silos. But they were people who actually taught me you can do both at the same time. In fact, you should do both if you really want to be a successful investigator. So I'm eternally grateful to them for showing me that. But then coming up to, what exactly, what I really feel that what I've really done is having helped develop a number of tools and techniques, therapeutics and diagnostics and so on. Now, I think the joy I get really is in mentoring the next generation of fellows. I really think that is a very important thing. If there is, I've been fortunate in really making some impact in the field, but I really think that if all of this knowledge and wisdom is not passed on, the baton is not passed on to the next generation, it will be not only wasted, but it will be a disservice to the work that I've already done. So to me today, the best thing that what I'm most grateful for is really watching my mentees, shine in their areas. Now, some of them are here with me, many of them are all over the world, but to watch them come up with their own ideas and really keep changing the field and advancing the field, advising them, mentoring them, that is the most thing that I'm most grateful for today.
Yeah, and I mean, your mentees, they really have a significant mentor over them. I mean, you've made a significant impact in the field. So again, we just thank you for just, really owning that responsibility and really helping the patients that you see and that you encounter, but even going further than that and just trying to find ways to really just find research and things that help all patients around the world. Just like I said, not the ones that you see today. What's the deeper question? What's the root of this thing so that you can find a better diagnostic and treatment options for everyone? So I know we've talked just a little bit about just all of your research that you are involved in, all of the studies that you're involved in, but what do you see as being a gap need still in research? And what do you hope that your lab can help with to further the research in the future?
Oh, that's a terrific question. So I think, we have a lot of large unmet needs that we really need to focus and help and learn. Now, one of the first things let me talk about is even today, as physicians, as healthcare providers, we don't understand clearly what our patients are telling us. That's because we don't have a uniform method and system. Now, some of us are very good clinicians. We know how to get a story. It's like journalists, how some journalists are very good at extracting stories and in telling the stories, whereas many others are not. Now, as clinicians, we are also very similar. Some of us are very good at extracting what the patient's problems are, because patients don't always can or have the knowledge and the insights to articulate what the problems are. I mean, they can say they have a problem, but they are not able to describe and help us. So we have to do a better job, perhaps a more uniform, better job in understanding our patients, first of all. I think that's the very first step, and we are failing in our very first step. So forget about really, trying to find a diagnosis and a treatment. We don't even understand them. So there, this really came to me in the last few years, 2-3 years, so what we've done as a small step, and I think we need to do more, is we have developed a couple of apps, simple apps that people can use on a cell phone, one for constipation and one for fecal incontinence. That IFFGD kindly was going to do a program as well on this. So they're simple 10, 12 questions that patients can answer. The reason for those questions and those apps is that now when they go to a physician, the physician need not even ask those questions. They've already been pre-asked. The patient's diary answers all those questions. And so the physician or the healthcare provider is better informed what the problem is. Once they know what the problem is, that can lead to proper diagnosis and treatment. So that is really what I'm trying to do. Is one of the first things that we have to improve is how we connect with our patients, how we extract information in a more uniform repository, and then use that to help diagnose. And then, of course, we really need more non-invasive diagnostic tools that can provide concrete information about what's happening inside the body without having to put tubes and things like that. So that's an area, another large, important area. And then the third clearly is our large, very large unmet need for treatment, whether it's treatment of IBS, where only 50-60% of our patients are satisfied, or constipation, or stool leakage, or gas and bloating. We are very much in the early phases of this. We don't have, even today, we have only one drug for SIBO that acts in the gut. We really need more drugs that are more effective and better that can act inside the body. So we, like that for fungus also. We need, if the fungus is in the gut, we need treatment in the gut. We don't want the fungus to interact with the heart or the liver, where they may cause mischief, which we don't want. So we need those kind of areas and growth so that we can be more gut selective, non-invasive, and thereby deliver treatments in a much better fashion.
Yeah, and we're hoping to really be able to publish the video about the GI apps, because that is a significant part of being able to help patients communicate better with their healthcare providers. I mean, obviously, that's the first step of really get into the nitty-gritty of what's causing your symptoms and how can we diagnose this and potentially help cure or just treat and help you manage. So yeah, we're really excited about the GI apps, and as well as other research that is coming out of your lab, especially the capsules and the smart pills and everything like that, what you're talking about of being non-invasive, but allowing those patients to still get the results that you're looking for in order to help each patient. So thank you again for all that you are involved in, and for not only doing your part of research now, but also mentoring those who are coming after you, so that hopefully we continue to further the research in gastrointestinal disorders.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be on the show. It is an honor to have been a recipient of the IFFGD Distinguished Researcher Award. I would like to thank the committee that actually chose me that time, all the patrons of IFFGD, the wonderful patients and the other benefactors who supported this organization. And I think I humbly thank them for their support in my research and my endeavors, which in turn has translated into real benefit to a lot of patients. And I hope we will continue on this journey to find better cures and better treatments for our patients. Thank you for your interview as well. You were terrific.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning into IFFGD's Research Award Winner Series titled Where Are They Now? Where today we've had the pleasure of catching up with Dr. Rao and how he has explained his journey through research, and hopefully the light at the end of the tunnel for those who are suffering from GI disorders. Thank you again.
Thank you.